Welcome to the ChicoBag podcast. I'm your host, Andy Keller, and today we're joined by David Bronner. He's the CEO, or as he calls it, the Cosmic Engagement Officer of Dr. Bronner's, the legendary soap company known as much for its activism as its products. We'll talk about how a family-run business became a global voice for regenerative agriculture, fair trade, and social justice, and what it means to run a company that puts values first. David, welcome.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about Dr. Bronner's. For people who don't know, you guys have a bottle that is legendary. Actually, the first time I saw Dr. Bronner's, I was on a sailing trip, and somebody brought it because, Dr. Bronner's is good for the environment. You can use it in a sailboat and, or camping, and it doesn't harm the environment. So that was my first introduction to it. And we were looking at the label going, oh my gosh, like, what is this? It's the first time I really read the label. And we called your customer service line, in the middle of the night, left a message, and we got a call back the next day from your customer service people explaining the label to us. So, for those who aren't aware, can you explain kind of what's the core to Dr. Bronner's?
Yeah, well, that label for my granddad, Dr. Bronner, was everything. It really distilled his message of one love, the one true religion of love across all faith traditions at their best, when they're not making idols out of their beliefs and demonizing each other. They're all pointing on just transcendent love that we're all children of. And he felt in the nuclear-armed world after World War II that in the next Holocaust, if we didn't realize the transcendent unity, we were going to all perish. And his parents were killed in the Holocaust. He himself was the third generation master soap maker from a German Jewish soap making family. His grandfather started making soap in 1858 in a small town of Laupheim, in the basement of the house there, which we actually purchased. My brother oversaw the purchase of our ancestral home and a few years ago, and then we remodeled it, and it's now a home for autistic adults. A Catholic-run charity does these like assisted living homes throughout southern Germany, and then also it's a museum that are still making history. So if you ever find yourself in Laupheim in southern Germany, you can go check out. It's the Dr. Bronner's Museum.
Wow,
it's
cool.
In the basement there, and it's super cool. And so my grandfather's dad and two uncles, Bertolt and his two brothers, ran the next generation. They expanded the operation quite a bit. They had a factory in Heilbronn, and our name was Heilbronner. So even though we started in Laupheim making soap, the family came from Heilbronn. We were supplying most of the liquid soaps through Germany, to the public washrooms. And my granddad was a pretty intense guy and was clashing with his dad. In 1929, at the age of 21, he came over to the States, not so much because of Hitler. It wasn't clear at that point what was about to go down, but more just to forge his own path in life. And he became a consultant of the U.S. soap industry, helped launch products, design factories, met my grandmother, had 3 kids, but also in the 30s became increasingly desperate to get his family out. His 2 sisters got out. One, Lottie, my grandma Lottie, ended up in a kibbutz in then Palestine, now Israel. And Louisa got out in 38 and was a chemist and then a professor of literature at UMass Boston. But his parents, like a lot of bourgeois Jews, thought they're going to write up a madness and stay toast too late, and the factory was aeronized, and they're deported and killed. So my granddad was this worker, and then also in the same time period, my grandmother was in and out of hospitals and died in 1944. So my granddad was going through an immense amount of grief. He had these 3 young kids, and then he was interned against his will in the kind of post-World War II McCarthyite Red Scare hysteria.
Oh, really?
and he got thrown into the literal insane asylum, kind of for speaking all about one world peace. And he escaped eventually. He came out to LA through a series of adventures. But I think probably because of fear that he could be locked up at any time, he put his kids in a series of foster homes. He financially supported them, well, and would check in once in a while, but kind of an absent father. But it was just 100% on his one love mission, and then the Holocaust was the dark inspiration, but was going around the country, lecturing on his peace plan and selling the soaps on the side, as family soaps. And by that time, the mantra of like better living through chemistry, like this is like plastics and synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and petrochemical everything, including in personal care. So these soaps are kind of out of fashion. But my granddad is still true to they're ecological, they're biodegradable. Like you're saying, you can wash your hair by the dog, by the side of the river. You don't got to worry about it. And word got out that the soaps were really good that he was selling on the side. And you notice that people were just coming to get the soap and not listening to what he had to say. So that's when he put the message on the label. And for him, the soap was there to sell the label. I mean, it was all about this, message that he was perfecting that was going to unite this species of Earth, flaming like, and with the rise of the counterculture and Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring and the birth of the environmental movement, um, which is all about how the songbirds, like agricultural poisons, were decimating wildlife, decimating all the wild bird populations, and then this war machine that wouldn't stop, and this generation that was seeking to live a simpler life, more in harmony with Earth. And here's the soap that's like super biodegradable and concentrated, sharply groovy, label of peace. So it really blew up in the counterculture and just became kind of iconic. So, and then in the first like health food stores and to yeah, I mean the story goes on. That was basically the core of the company and his passion. He founded the company as a nonprofit religious organization. To this day, our corporate name is All One God Think, but we do business as our DBA is Dr. Bronner's. IRS disagreed with the self-designated tax-exempt status at a certain point, and um, by he was in bankruptcy in the late '80s. Parents at that point got involved, um, helped right the ship, and exit as a for-profit. But we've got that nonprofit DNA at the heart of everything we do. Yeah,
So, I was looking at your website, and in your annual report, shows just a huge ramp of increase in growth at Dr. Bronner's. You were like a natural food store staple, and now you see Dr. Bronner's at Costco. Like, what's happened over the last 10 years that has led
yeah.
to this?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's been like a 25-year. Like I would say, like the real significant, would say macro trend of like health and wellness, like going mainstream. Really started to take off then. Um, and yeah, I mean, we've just been able to ride that. Most companies have sold. We've just been able to stay independent and self finance our growth and not take on misaligned investors. That's the kind of death knell of the so many mission driven companies. Um, yeah, and just really stay true to our ethos. And we cap our executive salaries at 5 times our lowest fully vested warehouse position. And all profits we don't need for the business, we give to the causes and charities. And I think because we fight so hard for our causes, whether it's regenerative organic agriculture or fair trade or raising the minimum wage, GMO labeling, or integrating psychedelic medicines. I mean, we really you've play to win. I mean, we're putting everything we have in these causes we engaged on. So I think like we get a lot of how do you say customers just through our advocacy, kind of have a sort of a paid media burger, which we are actually required to do, but historically, instead of that, we had just this kind of activist model
Yeah.
that got a lot of attention and love, and but then it's at the end of the day, it's the best soap. I mean, it's like very few soap, quote unquote, liquid soaps out there are actually soap. They're mostly detergent products. They have a slimy feel. They're not nearly as elegant as a true natural soap. So just the bathing experience and value with our soap and the aromatherapy, it's just that experience is like unmatched. And then you'd like layer in all the cool stuff we're doing. So I think that's kind of been the secret sauce.
Yeah, I think most people don't really know a lot about soap. I've been a Dr. Bronner's user and I know it feels different. Like I like it a lot more. And like, what is the difference between detergent and soap?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so just it gives you that clean feeling, like always like them detergents like generally will just kind of be slimy and hard to rinse off. But fundamentally, soap is the world's first surfactant, which means surface activation, of which detergents are also surface activations. But soap is categorically simpler to make. It was historically in ancient times when cooking fires, when the fat would drip into the ashes, the alkalinity in the primarily potassium carbonate in the ash would react with the triglycerides, with the fatty acids in the fat to form soap. Very simple acid base reaction where the potassium ion binds with the fatty acid, and then the glycerin backbone of the triglycerides. So all oils and fats are triglycerides. So the difference between olive oil and coconut oil and beef tallow and it's they're all the same chemical structure, triglyceride, but the glycerin backbone is the same, but the number of carbon, like the length of the carbon chain of the fatty acid and how many double bonds there are in that fatty acid, that gives you the different characteristics of the oil. And they also give you different characteristics in the soap. So shorter carbon chain without double bonds, like what are called high-caloric oils, like coconut and PKL, they give you a very good lather, even in hard water conditions, but they can be a little irritating. Whereas like olive and hemp oil, both are most 18 carbon chaining. They got double bonds. Olive's got oleic, got one double bond. Hemp's got linoleic and linoleic, a lot of omega 6 or omega 3. So that in soap making terms, but this makes the lather super emollient, but they're low lathers. So it's all about bringing them together in the right balance, and that's what my granddad's genius was. Um, Detergent, by contrast, so the first one was developed in the kind of I think before World War II by Germany, sodium sulfate, and we actually have a biodegradable cleaner called Salsa. It's not soap, and it's a plant-based surfactant, plant-based detergents. Um, but and their virtue is that they're very much more aggressive cleaners. They can be more free rinsing, even in very hard water conditions. But they're also, but on the skin, they can be very irritating. Um, and
Well,
they're categorically more environmentally intensive. Like even sodium sulfate, you're taking that like to make the soap, and we make soap the way it's been made for millennia. You just basically put your oils into your reactor, you green your potassium hydroxide, or in case of bar soap, sodium hydroxide, your alkali, and then there's a closed reaction. It's basically a very simple acid base reaction. It's like aside from baking bread, one of the like first things humanity did. Um, and the result is soap, glycerin, and water. And then we add some citric and bring it down into neutralize any free alkali and make it more smooth um and there's a couple other tricks we do, but basically the way it's been done forever. Sodium lauryl, which is basically like the simplest detergent. First, you gotta take the triglyceride and you gotta make it fatty alcohol. So that's like 4,000 psi with hydrogen as the catalyst. You're reacting and you're breaking that triglyceride and you're making fatty alcohol. And then you've got to sulfonate that fatty alcohol. So that's a whole other step. And then you neutralize it to the sodium salt. And it's just like even the simplest one is just like, four more steps making soap. It's
So,
just,
so when I
yeah.
hear the word alcohol, it just seems like, is that why detergent kind of dries out your skin?
Yeah. It's, I mean, not all detergents are the same. I mean, some can be more emollient, but yeah, I mean, especially sodium sulfate, just taking that one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing though too. So it's a shorter chain alcohol that are more irritating. They're those some more aggressive cleansers and the more
So bottom line, natural soap, the way you make it is much better for your skin, and for the environment than tradition,
detergent.
excuse me, detergents that are out there. So
Yeah, and just to make the point too, like we're actually certified under the National Organic Program for food. Like the way we make, I mean, it's that simple, it's that elegant, and we can actually use certified organic and now certified regenerative organic materials, whereas these detergents are not remotely in the ballpark of what would be eligible for the National Organic Program. And yeah, in general, are not made from organic feedstock, right? And and, there's no way to make so I guess how do you say theoretically you could make them from regenerative organic agriculture, but they're just produced on such a scale that it's not happening. So yeah, so better for the earth, better for us. Yeah, it's just better.
So you mentioned Dr. Bronner's is private, and I know, and you alluded to, public companies and investors. You start having conflicts of purpose, I guess, and so it's easier to stay private, but really you're talking about kind of status quo of business, right? And you guys are doing business differently. And I know you're a benefit corporation. Can you talk about like what it means to be a benefit corporation and how that's different from, a traditional business? And when I say corporation, it doesn't necessarily have to be a corporate structure, but the idea that any type of business that is traditional, what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. There is the legal benefit corp structure, and we are a benefit corp. And what that does is allows us, we're still how do you say subchapter as corporation, but you could also be a C corp. The benefit corp overlays that and allows you to enshrine principles other than maximizing fiduciary return for your shareholders, which is the sole and only responsibility of a traditionally organized business. Like a public company, that's their one and only responsibility, and if they're not doing that, they can be sued. So, for example, we give anywhere from 25 to 50% of our profits away every year, just depending. And, sometimes less, sometimes more, average about a third. Um, we would be sued at the drop of a hat by an investor if we were under a traditional corporate form and we had a misaligned investor who said, okay, look, maybe you can justify as cost marketing 2%, but not 33%. That's ridiculous. And they would win in court easily. I mean, a judge would just say, yeah, you're going to stop giving his money away. I mean, he owns this company and we're part of it. And even a minority shareholder can bring that kind of lawsuit.
And then
A
your
benefit
board of
corp, right?
directors could fire you,
Oh, yeah,
ultimately.
that routinely happens, right? I mean, it happens all the time. Like CEOs that try to chart a more responsible path, or Unilever was, axed their CEO in the last couple of years. He was trying to do something better. Not that it was that great in the first place, but at least it was better. And now, he got axed, and then they brought in someone who walked back a lot of their ESG commitments. But as a benefit corp, we can enshrine principles other than maximizing fiduciary return, such as like we are gonna, dedicate profits to the causes we believe in. Um, and XYZ things, and basically it protects you from that kind of lawsuit as a benefit corp. So it's kind of like new hybrid in between a nonprofit and a for-profit. It allows you to utilize your profits in ways that as a traditional for-profit would be subject to a shareholder lawsuit, and yeah, it is not that tenable. Now, B Corp certification is separate from a benefit corp, confusingly. So B Corp is an independent third party certification that basically assesses your company in different kind of like areas, like kind of your worker, like your wages and your benefits, your um, environmental impact, your use of solar, renewables, your sourcing practices, and he gets points for all that. And so long as you score over 80, then you can become a B Corp. Um, Historically, this was, up until tomorrow, hopefully, this was a real problem because companies could hit their 80 points by running up the score in more, a few areas and then completely flailing in others. The revised standards are launching, I believe tomorrow. I'm not sure. That's what I've been told. Uh, and my understanding was they are going to require minimum scores in each of the areas.
Great. So you were part of that advocacy, right? So very publicly, it basically drew a line with B Corp certification. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So separate and apart from that problem that is being fixed, there's a more fundamental issue in our opinion, which is around supply chain integrity. That as an agricultural based company, like any food company or any cosmetics company or any clothing company, you have huge agricultural supply chains. So the farms that are growing your food, your fiber, your raw materials for your soaps. So the amount of impact that we as a company have in our supply chain versus in our headquarters is massive. Like we have like, you know, 100 times the land base as far as like our ecological impact. There's like 100 times the number of farmers and workers involved in growing those coconuts and processing the coconut oil and getting them to us. And while it's important that we have ethical business practices here in our headquarters, all renewable and have really good wages, good benefits, like that, just doing that and not attending to what's going on in our supply chain is like, that's a joke. And you have to like, especially in developing world countries, whether it's often labor abuse, really lax environmental standards, like you need credible eco-social certification of your supply chain to just make sure it's righteous. And, we help co-launch the regenerative organic certification. It takes organic as a baseline and it layers on um, soil health, fair labor, and animal welfare, pasture-based criteria. We would love to see that be required, but we recognize that's like the high bar, but at least something, at least a B Corp would require some kind of, have a suite of certifications. You got to be at least one of these needs to be in place on your major raw material supply chain. And there's already an issue, but it wasn't like that big of a deal when B Corp was mostly, you know, it was mostly certain, it still is mostly service companies that don't have agricultural supply chains. So maybe a third CPGs, consumer product companies like ourselves. Um, Back in the day, center of gravity was with companies that were taking responsibility for their supply chains and certifying to eco-social criteria, Patagonia, Unity, Wacky. But then over time, it started getting bigger and bigger, and then the Nestle subsidiaries started getting certified. So first Nespresso, and then Nestle Health Sciences, and then Unilever Entire in Australia. And like Nestle Health Sciences, it's got like 40 brands and thousands of products. And, you know, like the rubber meets the road. Like what's in your product? How is it being sourced? How is it being produced? How's it being farmed? And if you're not attending to that, then it's a joke, right? And
Yeah.
that was our problem. Is that like there's, I mean, some of these products are certified, but some of them are not. There, nothing changed for Nestle Health Sciences from the day before to the day after, you know, or the year before the year after B Corp certification. I mean, none of those supply chains, if you look up like carnation, it's like GMO corn syrup and non-fat factory film milk powder. It's just like there's, I mean, at least have some kind of something in place. It doesn't have to be regenerative organic, but so that's been our beef. And
Yeah. I've been to some sustainable business conferences, and I've talked to, some of the executives at some of these large CPG companies talking about supply chain transparency. And, one of the responses I got was, oh, we have thousands of, suppliers. There's no way we could ever, do that. And this is the same company that, is sourcing, cocoa beans, from Africa, which is, it's known that that supply chain has slave child labor in it, and they're big enough that they could go and visit these farms and locations. They could put up, the controls and the systems and the support to make sure the supply chain's clean. But, oh, it's a commodity. We just buy, from the middlemen. We don't, that's not our problem,
Mhm.
is the response. So what you're saying essentially is to be a B Corp, all you need is an 80, and you could just ignore the supply chain, get an 80 somewhere else, like you're
Mhm.
greening your headquarters, ignore the supply chain. But now going forward, because of your advocacy, you've changed basically the guidelines so that they have to address their supply chain in order to be a B Corp, right?
Uh, that remains to be seen.
But we'll
So
see, right? So that's your
yeah,
goal,
we're
though,
gonna see.
right?
That's our goal. Like our goal was we were, engaging in the internal B Corp process, for years and not getting anywhere. So we felt like, okay, well, we're gonna exit and put a exclamation point on the concern for the larger B Corp community to really understand, because we were just kind of having these like, official channel dialogues. So like, yeah, just make it like, look, so and hopefully influence that revised standard more than otherwise. And we don't want to, we appreciate allies who are saying B Corp. Like, we're not saying everyone, all of us can leave them. We want them to be able to advocate from the inside, or kind of the bad cop, good cop
Yeah.
thing. And hopefully the standard revision does address. I honestly would be surprised. I'd be happily surprised uh, if they do. So we'll see.
Well, I'm rooting for you. ChicoBags, as you know, is a B Corp, and proud to be one. And ultimately, I care very dearly about supply chain transparency because, as you know, and as you've mentioned, that's where most of the damage to our environment happens. And to people as well. So that is where businesses that with supply chains could make the biggest difference ultimately.
Yeah, right on. Two things on that. One, I just want to say VCore did was helpful to the list of questions when you first go through it. It's like, what kind of childcare policy you guys? Like, oh yeah, we don't have a childcare policy. It's like a real good you know thing to like really kind of check off things you're not really thinking about and attending to. So did appreciate that. Um, and then just on the supply chain. I want to talk that we've launched paperboard carton refill. Like we did a life cycle analysis on aluminum, or glass, or paperboard, or paper carton. What's the least environmental footprint? So paper carton one does have sort of plastic liner, but much less. Um, and then we're also doing bulk refill. We're piloting around stores, natural stores here locally in San Diego, but like a completely packaging free uh, bulk refill. So, working with a kombucha distributor who, gets the empty pails from the stores and swaps them and just keeps it in a cycle. So hopefully that'll roll out through the country pretty soon. And then the plastic we're not offsetting, at least the vertical. We're mostly PCR at this point, but there's like some virgins still like our caps and a cup here, there, another place. I think it's like 20%. We're constantly moving to as much PCR as we can.
Yeah, post consumer recycled content.
Yeah. And sourcing that in all of our packaging. But any version that we can't offset, we're we call it plastic neutrality, but we're funding collections in developing world countries that don't have proper like recycling and sanitation and just have like huge amounts of plastic waste just piling up everywhere, to go and pick, on fair trade wages to collect and bring them to a center that we help sponsor in
Oh, that's cool.
Ghana.
So that's the idea. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, we want to, ideally try for everyone the, more sustainable packaging, bulk, ideally, and then anything we're not able to, yeah. So then we go collect an equivalent amount from the environment to put in the local recycling chains, and yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, that's the idea of, you reduce all you can and then you offset the rest, and
yeah,
continually look at it as technology and things improve. So you're coming out with paperboard. That's kind of like a milk carton, right?
yeah. Usually I have one around here somewhere, but I guess I cleaned my desk recently.
Well, they're on your website, so anyone who's listening, could go to your website and check that out. You have a full annual report on all the great things you're doing in your supply chain, which I found really fascinating. Um, which of the projects, in each of the countries that you're working in, and I guess with each of the suppliers that you're working with, I noticed that you're doing a lot of work on the ground there. Which are you most proud of, or which do you think are most interesting?
I mean, each of them have really good stories. And Garrulous Hone, our VP of Special Projects, uh, is kind of oversees our regenerative agriculture team of like 8, very international, that help set up our sister companies and or work with our suppliers that we're like a majority customer very closely. Um, And so Gary wrote a book called Honor Thy Label, Dr. Bronner's Journey to a Clean, Green, and Ethical Supply Chain. So that's goes real deep in each one. But I would say the olive, I really love the olive oil story. 90% of our olive oil comes from the West Bank, from Palestine's West Bank. Uh, when I did like Google search for fair trade organic olive, coconut, and palm oil back in like 2005, there was nothing except for Canon's olive oil. And talked to Nazgar Bufara. He was a professor of anthropology at University of Wisconsin Madison. Had a fair trade puppet shop, but had grown up in the West Bank and moved back there to take the fair trade ethos to all the partners in the area. And this is like during the second Intifada. I mean, it was really a tough time, but was organizing these farmers to uh, you know uh, harvest their olive oil and pay them fair trade rates, like when the market completely dropped out and obviously doing business was very difficult. And then to be clear, we're not being particularly anti-Israel about it, although I got to say I'm like super bummed by Netanyahu and the whole right-wing fascist takeover, but, who we claim because we're doing the same thing. But we, very much support Israel inside of its 1967 borders. Great body who there, I got from there. Um, and so we sourced an Israeli side from a Jewish family farm and half from a Palestinian Christian project on the Israeli side. So we have Muslim, Jewish, Christian olive oil from the Holy Land mixed in our scope. And this really, we support peace work on either side, like um, combatants for peace, which are like former combatants on either side that advocate for peace, and Parent Circle, who've lost children on either side, and they're joint Palestinian Israeli organizations. So really supporting the peacemakers on either side and trying to model a future of coexistence um, in our soap. And yeah, and it very much resonates to my granddad's philosophy, all one philosophy. And um,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't think there's a more beautiful way to embody the philosophy of all one, because it's it seems like in the political climate today, if you have any empathy for Palestinians, you're anti-Semitic, or it's just like it's crazy. So the idea of bringing people together and through a supply chain and supporting everyone that's involved, I think it's I think it's great. So
yeah. No, thank you. And we're praying for peace there. And, I hope Israelis can get rid of their governments with as much as we can ours. And, but oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, well, David, continue the great work. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Dr. Bronner's, is an inspiration to us at ChicoBag. And, I imagine anyone listening to this who is curious about running a benefit corporation, using business as a force for good, doing more than just making a profit. I think we'll learn more about you and what you guys are doing, and continue leading the way. Thank you.
Right on. And one, actually, I just forgot. So Purpose Pledge, I forgot to talk about it. We've got a new ethical business group association that's for land and ocean-based companies. So, and one of the things we are trying to argue about B Corp that wasn't going anywhere either was a tiered system. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to have this practice and this theory of change, engaging these multinationals and making them like some tiny bit better, but they're still terrible. Um, at least do like a lead style, like bronze, silver, gold, like do something like that. And then have, incentives and, higher criteria at each level. But anyway, so we've launched Purpose Pledge, and it's we've got like Mimi Chi and Guac King, Nature's Path, and Seth Goldman's new iced tea company, Just Iced Tea, Justice Tea, in a cohort of 20 equal exchanges in there. But it's like if you go to purposepledge.org, I hope that's what it is. It's we're in our pilot year. We're gonna kind of ground truth all these commitments, but it's like commitment to living wage, commitment to supply chain integrity, commitment to carbon neutrality, and just 10 powerful criteria that get to the heart of a purpose-led company. And so we're excited for that as well.
That's great. I'll check that out. I think we could definitely sign up. Purpose Pledge. And so, business is a powerful force, and it can destroy our planet or it can save it. So, pick a side and let's sign up for the Purpose Pledge. Thank you, David.
Right on. Thank you, Andy.
Take care.
I am.